Okay, awesome. Well, today we have some very exciting speakers, Adam, Graddy, and Kari Wyrsch. But before we get started, we do have some Market Center announcements that I want to make sure that we cover. So the first off is we are having our annual Pineapple Whip event, June 24th from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Market Center. So if you haven't been with us before, we have the Pineapple Whip truck come out to the Market Center. They'll be underneath the awning on the east side of the building, and they'll be serving up your favorite whips, and you can bring your whole family, and it's all covered on the Market Center. The next thing we have is our individual agent mastermind. So this is our first ever individual agent mastermind. We have 4 rock star panelists that will be sharing their knowledge, and we'll be covering overcoming objections, how to set boundaries with your clients, and how to think outside the MLS. So even if you are on a team or you just don't know where to start, we hope that you can join us. I think we have about 50 people already saying that they're joining. So we can't wait to blow this out of the water, and we'll continue this moving forward. And then the last thing we're doing is we have Ignite kicking off. So this year, Ignite is a little bit different. It's going to be broken out into 2 different sessions. So the first session is covering those 0 to 5 transactions. And that is for all new agents that have joined us within the last year. And then the next part will be in middle of July, covering for agents from 5 to 16 transactions. So I'm going to put in the chat the Google form for you to sign up and register. It is free this time. So before we had material costs, but all of that is free. And we are so excited. And I think some of our instructors, we've already reached out and we're building up a rockstar lineup for that. So I'll put that in the chat. And then without further ado, we have Adam and Kari, and then those mics are ready for you guys to take over.
Awesome. So I got a phone call last night from Tim saying, hey, I need help. Can you be there tomorrow? And will you bring value? Right? And pretty open-ended. So, Kari and I discussed last night, maybe just kind of going around the room and talking to you guys about some objections that you're having right now, or maybe some concerns you have with the market. Maybe it's winning a listing, maybe it's winning offers, maybe it's lead generation or getting a listing. But I'd love to maybe even script or role play through some real life experiences that you guys are going through right now. And so that you can take away something and implement it today in your business. That sound good? Yes, sir. Okay. And so I'm in like Gary's mastermind group, and we come with no topic whatsoever. And we just kind of go around the room and somebody opens it up and we just kind of rabbit hole down that and just keep going. So I'd like to try to do that style today. So who wants to start?
Offers winning. We have a buyer. We want them to win.
Sure.
They have said, I am willing to do whatever it takes to win this.
I love that.
And they don't have a ton of extra cash.
Okay.
So they have, maybe they could go conventional and they're going 5% down and they're willing to pay their own closing costs. But other than that, they don't have anything extra to bring to the table.
Okay. So we can definitely go through some strategies that don't cost money, that we find that are really appealing to our co-op agents and to sellers. I'd also encourage you guys, if you don't have a buyer that has that attitude, they're not a buyer in this market, right? So trying to manage your time and going through your day, on our buy team, we went through and we would normally do like A, B's, and C's. So we're looking for ready, willing, and able, right? The 3 criteria to be a buyer. And so, 2 of the 3 is probably a C, 3 of the 3, but isn't quite ready yet, or maybe isn't a buyer in this market like I spoke about, is a B, but an A is I'm ready, willing, and able, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. What's that mean, to do whatever it takes, right? That means that when I sit down with Amy at my consult and Amy says you have to do X to win this house, that you're ready to do that. And then I'm willing to take the advice of my agent, right? And not of my parents or my next door neighbor or the guy at the water cooler, right? That I'm willing to be 100% on board with my agent and their expertise. And you guys can categorize yourself, those buyers right now, you're thinking of them, right? Those couple of really loyal people that understand your value. And then there's everybody else, right? So those are the people you want to be spending your most time on. But I'm going to let Kari talk about this, winning multiple offers, because we're winning multiple offers again and again and again using VA and FHA clients, right? Because of some of these strategies. So go ahead.
Oh, that was.
Give away all your secrets, Kari.
You know, I think that everybody's overcomplicating it and everybody thinks that there's like some secret sauce. And I think the big secret sauce is simplifying your offer. Just because a lot of times what I was finding, especially at the beginning of the year, whenever all of this kind of really changed, you know, some of my language that I had in there, which was protecting the buyer, was actually hurting them. And so by removing all of that and just making it really clean, limit your inspections. You know, you can still ask for inspections. And, you know, the conversation is, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you know, we're going to be in the house. And a lot of times we only have 30 minutes in the house. So we're going to go through and I'm going to look really closely. I'm not an inspector. However, I'm going to point out as much as I possibly can. And then let's limit our inspections to the roof, the attic, and the crawl space. Those are things that we actively cannot see, right? So having those conversations about what we can do to limit that, I think is really good. Having the conversation about the appraisal, I think is important. And having them be able to cover their closing costs, I think is huge. You know, we also are not just trying to sell our buyer to the seller, but we're trying to say, like, we want to be your co-op agent of choice, and we dumb everything down. I'm realizing right now that in this multiple offer market that we're in, some agents are new. Some of them like are frustrated because they have 12 offers. Well, if I can make it super simple and I do a cover sheet on every single one of my offers, and I basically say, here are the bullet points, because it makes it easier. So they want to work with me because I've made their life easy. Like, I've had so many agents call me and be like, holy cow, like, I want to work with you and you've made this super easy for me. And this looks really nice and clean. And if you'll do X, we'll take your offer, but you've got to change this, you know? And sometimes it's stuff I can't do, right? It's switching them to cash, or, you know, there's certain things I can't do, but sometimes it's a closing date. So there is a voice-to-voice conversation on every single offer. There is not there's a text, there's an email, but there's a voice-to-voice conversation. And I think a lot of agents aren't doing that.
That was a lot fast. All right, let's break it down really quick. So in the beginning, you know, when she says, hey, we're going to be going through the house and we're going to have a really limited time. You guys are experiencing that, you know, 100 to 300, especially, right? Where you're showing up and the appointment before you is still in there. The appointment behind you is already waiting, right? Somebody who doesn't have an appointment showing up, trying to interrupt yours, right? So we want to have that conversation with the client before we go to the property. We're wanting to do that in the very beginning when we're doing the buy consult and talking about bedrooms, bathrooms. Here, got it. Thanks. Is that better? Good. Kelsey, can you hear? When we're talking about like bedrooms and bathrooms, school district priorities, you're wanting to talk to them in the very beginning. And guys, you guys are in a very tight market in the inventory we're going to be looking at. And this is what showings are going to be like. So when we pull up and it's a traffic jam, there's no shock, right? You've already explained that to them, that all the good properties are going to be going through that. And talking to them about, you know, what are the expensive items that maybe we couldn't overcome, like crawl space, right? There's a lot of unknown. Have you guys ever been in your own crawl space? I haven't, right? So talking about crawl spaces, talking about roofs, talking about really expensive items that you can't overcome. But, you know, a double tap breaker seems expensive, but it's $40, right? And so when we're looking at a $100,000 purchase, what's $40, right? So maybe talking to them up front about limiting the inspections to a dollar amount. Or I just got a really great offer from Jen Davis a couple of days ago where she limited the inspections to over a dollar amount. So she said, I'm not going to ask for any one item unless it's at least exceeding $2,500, right? So, you know, that would be a mildew problem and vapor barrier in a crawl space. That would be a new roof. That'd be a new HVAC system, right? We're limiting it to big ticket items. And I know going into this that her buyer's not going to nitpick me for a bunch of screwdriver fixes, because what we're seeing continuously is the buyers feel like they're overpaying. So they're trying to make up the value during the inspection. You guys are seeing that as well. And on the sales side, my seller had 6 offers. So he is pumping his chest out like, well, just go back on the market. Have you guys heard it? Right? And so it's managing those expectations up front and making sure from a sales side and a buy side that everybody understands going in. So that's something really quick and easy that you can do. You're not spending any of their money, right? Of limiting that. So the other thing Kari covered or talked about was limiting the inspection time frame, right? So do we need 15 days or can we pause really quick, call our inspector and go ahead and hold a time for Wednesday and ask for 5 days so that I'm going into the negotiation with the agent, letting him know, hey, I'm going to limit your risk being off the market because we're going to have everything back to you in 5 days. Okay, the inspection comes back and it's scary, right? We can always ask for an additional 5 days per the contract, right? So we bought 10 days if we need it, but we can limit that time frame. And when we talk about being the co-op agent of choice, right? We want to make it simple and easy so that they can go to their seller and say, hey, this one only has 5 days. This one has 15 days, this one has 10 days, this one has 12 days, but 5 days sets you apart and doesn't cost your client any money. Helpful? Okay. Financing. Paying their own closing costs, not always doable, but in the opportunity that you have to talk to the lender up front and ask them, how important is this, right? And establishing that up front so we know going into negotiation whether we're going to need those items or not. And sometimes you guys can't get around it, but a lot of times you can just by asking the right questions with the lender.
Well, and in the buy side consult, I'm finding that I'm having harder conversations that I did before because I was uncomfortable. I don't like asking people how much money do you have in your bank account, but you basically have to ask that question, right? I need to know how much money that they have. Okay, so you have money for your down payment for a 5% loan or a 10% loan. Okay, well, what if we were to switch that to a 5% loan and then we have money to do an appraisal gap? You know, how much money do you have in savings? Asking those kind of questions, it's actually really, really important because you're able to move people around a little bit differently. Everybody has this idea that in order to do a conventional loan, you have to have 20%. Well, if I all of a sudden know that they have 20% and I can switch them to a 10% down, and now we've got all this extra cash if we need it, you know, it's just a way of constantly retweaking and reworking them that they don't understand because they're first time home buyers, you know. And I call the lender and I ask all those questions too immediately following. So if we did this and we were to switch this and this would change their payment to here, it usually isn't a big enough like gauge that it makes me the professional.
Correct.
And then it makes it so it's like, okay, well, you can do 5% down and it changes your payment from, you know, this amount per month to this amount. And then we've got all this extra money, but they don't have to make all those decisions right up front, but it gives them options.
And remember, guys, not necessarily first time home buyers, right? It's second time home buyers, third time home buyers. Like this is only their second or third time to do this in maybe a 15-year period. So they're not used to it and they don't know what questions to ask. So you have to be their advocate, even against their lender, and go in and ask those questions because all they did was walk in and ask for 20% down conventional loan, right? They didn't know to ask all of this other stuff. So you need to be their voice and ask those questions and then present them options. Guys, I know you said 20% down was important to you. Let's talk about that. Can I show you why we might want to put 10% down and then use these reserves for closing cost or to keep it in the bank or right? Or to set those aside for repairs, right? So is it more important to put 20% down or is it more important to get the house, right? And that's what we're talking about at our strategy session with the buyer. And again, they don't know to ask those questions, so you have to ask them for them.
Good.
Let's start a list really quick. So the other thing you want to do is call the agent. They sing like a bird if you give them the opportunity, okay?
They do.
What's important to your seller, right? They may say like Hogan Republic Road, super important to them. Great, done. What else, right? They're closing on another house June 27th. Great. Do they need extra time to get out, right? Could we close June 27th back to back and give them 3 days to move? Didn't cost my buyer any money. Huge advantage to the seller, right? Just by calling and having those conversations up front, we can learn a lot about the seller situation and what's important to them. So refrigerators, washers and dryers, keeping that stuff out of the contract, right? When she talks about making the offer as clean as possible, try to get all of that stuff gone. A lot of times they'll give it to you anyway if you ask about it later, right? But keeping it all gone up front. Multiple offers in your email, right? And then you're using, I don't know, how many different sources to send me 9 docs, right? And I'm getting multiple emails from you, no phone call from you, no text from you, nothing, right? Having that conversation up front, uploading everything into one PDF so it's you can easily forward it on to the seller if needed, right? Putting those bullet points together, especially when you're in a multiple offer situation and they have, even if it's 3 offers, right? It's overwhelming. You know, it's Saturday night. You've got something else going on. It's 9 o'clock. You've got all these offers to go through. You're trying to look like the expert to your seller, right? You want to have all that data in front of you. That cover sheet is gold. It doesn't cost anything, and it says this, you know, the agent can go through and verify that, but it's just a quick bullet point of everything that's going on. So when we want great communication between the other agent and their client, when they're talking about our offer. So something really simple, it doesn't cost you any money. What else can we do? Call the agent, do a cover sheet, one email, voice-to-voice contact, seems so silly. Absolutely, confirming they received it. Has that happened to you guys before? Oh, I didn't get your offer, right? I sent it last night. Oh, sorry, we made a decision this morning. Didn't know yours was in the mix, right?
I do that in the bottom of my email. Please confirm receipt of this. Like,
And
please
sit and wait for
acknowledge,
it.
right? I actually have a list. So every single time I call an agent, you know, I ask them all the questions. So do you have any offers? When are you planning on presenting offers? How many offers do you have? Are any of them cash? Are any of them over asking? Is there an appraisal contingency? Is there an acceleration clause? Are they doing inspections? Is there a closing date that's appealing to the seller? What closing company do you or the seller prefer? Is earnest money important? Are you accepting love letters? Is there anything that is important to your seller that I need to know before writing my offer? Every single time.
And when I say sing like a bird, a lot of times they'll tell you everything.
They'll tell me everything.
You have to call and ask.
Yep.
Right? But sending a text saying, hey, I just sent you an offer on Main Street, you did your clients a disservice, right? You got to call and get that information and then write your offer around it. And the reason she's asking all that stuff is because we know what lever to pull if it's a cash deal, right? We know what lever to pull if it's over asking, right? Are they waiving inspections? Well, that's a conversation we're now going to have with our buyer so that we have an opportunity to win that deal. What else you want to put on the list?
The only other thing, really quick, the only other thing that I would say is that I also take that phone call one step farther. And then I say, okay, so thank you so much. You'll be receiving my offer. Please let me know if you have any questions. Let us know if there's anything that we can do to make our offer better. And while I've got you on the phone, do you have anything that's coming up that is not on the market yet that I can possibly know about? And that's how we're getting a ton of, I mean, we got 5 properties last week and I think, put 4 of them under contract. And they weren't even on the market. So. I think you had a question. Are you so excited?
Yes. Just wondering, sometimes we offer cash over the appraisal, and I'm having a hard time simplifying that
The language.
to the agent on the other side who doesn't really understand that there may be something better than a cash offer, and how to explain that simply to the buyers.
So the question is the appraisal gap and how to have that conversation. And what I will tell you is that you're probably overcomplicating the language, and it just has to be very, very simple, because once you write it very simple, then it becomes simple and then the other agent can understand it. And then we just write, what do we put? Buyer to cover appraisal gap not to exceed $10,000.
One sentence.
So it's like one sentence, 7 words, and that's it. And then the conversation with the buyer is, you know, you're going to get a loan amount for say $100,000, and should the property not appraised, you're going to cover up to $10,000. So up to $110,000. And your down payment is still going to be, you know, 5% on the $100,000, and then you're going to pay the additional 10.
So it's important to find out what kind of dollars we have to work with up front, and making sure the lender's a part of that conversation so they know what we're going into in the beginning. And the lender wants the deal done, guys. Let's be honest, right? The lender wants to work with you to get the deal done, but you've got to call and ask the questions. Amy, is that helpful? Winning multiple offers? Anything specific you're running into that we haven't covered?
I'm dealing with it, but the trickiest one for me right now is FHA and VA. You know, the government finance and dealing with other agents who are like, we don't want to deal with government appraisers. We don't want to have to fix anything. So it's easier for us to take a cash or conventional offer when those are on the table.
So then you just say that the buyer is willing to cover all of the FHA required repairs. And then, I mean, why is that any different than the other conventional offer?
And again, managing expectation of the buyer up front. How often are those repairs even exceeding $500? You know, most of the time they're less. And so, say,
Yes.
We're not spelling out the dollar amount, right? Because we're going to cover it.
Have you had a lender take issue with that? Like a VA and them saying they're not allowed to spend money on the property until they take possession?
Haven't.
Okay.
And if you run into it, ask more questions, right? Why is that important? Because at that point, once we're under contract, I'm willing to spend the $500, Mr. Lender, if that's what it takes just to get to the closing table.
And that's a conversation you have with the agent too. Like, hey, my buyer's willing to cover those costs and or my buyer's willing to do those as long as you're going to allow us to have, get in the property to fix anything. But I mean, a lot of times nothing's even flagged on those. Yes. We've done it. Yeah.
Why are people afraid of government appraisers? I'm new, so I haven't had one, so I don't understand
Bad
that.
education.
What? Bad
Sorry.
education?
It's a really great loan program. So it's a limiting belief that it's a struggle to get to closing, but the appraiser, that FHA appraiser comes back out and rechecks the property. And so a lot of times they'll flag issues and it's a second inspection as far as the seller is concerned, right? It's another chance for them to have to open their checkbook that they don't want to deal with. And if usually a listing agent has the choice between a conventional buyer or an FHA buyer, they'll choose the conventional buyer only for the fact that they don't have to go through that second inspection. It's a very non-invasive inspection, right? They're normally dressed up like Kari, like the, a female appraiser just kind of walking through the house, checking the appliances, checking, they're just glancing up in the attic. They're glancing in the crawl space. It's a very in and out quick inspection. If you've ever gone to meet an FHA appraiser and let them in a house, they're not there very long. It's nothing like the regular inspection, but it still is a second chance for the seller to have to spend money. And so listing agents try to avoid it if possible.
All they're looking for is health and safety. That's the only thing they're there for. Yes, Lee.
And they're nothing today like what they used to be.
Correct.
They used to be pretty clamped down on certain items.
Yeah.
And the last couple I've had, it was nothing.
Lee, I
Really.
appreciate you saying that because
Yep.
the sellers, right, that have been around the block a couple of times, they remember FHAs in the 80s, the 90s, VAs especially, when it was very, very invasive inspection. It was tough. The threshold to get over to the finish line was tough, and it's not like that anymore. So again, it's an education piece where you've got to educate the customer. What else? Amy can't be the only one with an issue. Go ahead.
I would just say like the classic objection that's happening now when we're talking about someone about listing their home to capitalize on the seller's market. Well, where am I going to go?
Sure.
You got to turn around and buy in the same seller's market that you just sold in. So
Take that, Amy.
I think that the big thing is that, sure, I can completely understand where you're coming from. But whenever you're selling your house, the best thing is that we can write all the terms that you want. So we can do a longer closing date. We can say that we want a lease back. I mean, the seller is in the driver's seat, so they can have all the terms that they want. And then it's very, very specific that you have a really good strategy session to understand exactly what it is that your buyer, that them as buyers are looking for on the back end. And you start on that immediately. So, but we've got to have your house under contract now.
And so it's rating that buyer, that A, B, and C we talked about earlier, but going to the seller and saying, okay, what's important to you, right? And well, I'm not going to be homeless, Cole. Okay, let's talk about that. And so you can put in the listing that it's, contingent upon them finding a satisfactory place to live within a certain amount of time. That's why it's important when Amy calls me and says, hey, what's important to your seller? And I say, they don't have a place to live yet. And she's like, oh, no problem. Right? We'll give you guys, 60-day close, 90-day close. We'll give you a 30-day lease back. Right? Those are things that my seller wants to hear that don't cost the buyer any money. Right? And Amy can take that back to her customer and my seller's ecstatic and I didn't cost the buyer any money. Right? So we both win. And so it's why it's important to ask those questions up front. So you're talking about, you've got people in your pipeline that are ready to sell, but they can't find a place to live. Sure. Have you had a client be homeless yet? No. Have you told them that? You have 100% success rate, right? I have 100% success rate, right? and explain that to them and ask them what's important. And guys, if we win on the market and you accepted an offer with a contingency on you finding something, would that make you feel better? Right? Have you given them that option? Right? And talk to them up front, because those are things that other agents aren't having the same conversation with, and it's going to set you apart. Right? Sign here. Let's go on the market. And here's why I think it's a great idea to list now. And remember, guys, there's inventory. The houses are selling. You know, there's just not a lot of it. But there's somebody out there finding houses for their customers. I mean, look at the top-down report. Look at the Flex hot sheet every day, right? Houses are moving. It's just a matter of, are you going to be able to get it for your client?
Well, and at Keller Williams, I mean, if Rachel can show all of our numbers, like we've sold more houses this year than we ever have. I mean, we're like 2013 stats already, you know, and it's May
As a company.
as a company.
I got one.
Sure.
So what's the conversation you guys are having with sellers to basically stop them from getting greedy?
I get it. Nope.
Right.
And so again, expectation management up front, right? This is where we're listing the house. This is why. Here's the comp data. And then you want to have that conversation about what an offer looks like to them. You know, so that you know up front. So you're not calling them that night excited with 6 offers and them going, oh, I'm going to wait for more, right? Colton had one this weekend, and the guy's on the golf course with his buddies. He's like, oh, you sold it in 2 days. That's too early to sell. You got to hold it. Okay. Well, we didn't have the conversation. Yeah.
We're already higher than the comps would suggest.
And so you have to have that conversation with the seller up front when you're taking the listing about what it looks like when you get an offer and what their expectation is. Showing them the sales price to list price ratio on the CMA, asking them if that's acceptable, right? Right now we're going for 99.5% in your neighborhood, right? Is that what you're looking at? So that would mean we're taking an offer of 207, right? You're getting that buy-in up front. So again, you're managing their expectation up front. So when they do get an offer and it's $3,000 over an asking price and it's, you know, 210, done. You know, they're excited, but it's asking those questions up front, slowing the process down. Right? They are paying you to be the professional. You have to walk in and act like it by asking the right questions.
Agents are getting greedy too. And that's the really, really hard part is it's like, is it being fueled by the seller or is the agent being that way? Just because there's been several times where they've gotten offers and he's like, there's no way. And so, I mean, you've got to be the professional and slow the process down and say, Mr. Seller, I know that this is a guaranteed deal, even though this one's $5,000 less, and having those really good conversations with your client.
And oftentimes we're not taking the highest offer because you know, we're looking for that threshold of how do we get to the finish line? And a lot of times when you write a 190 on a 159, probably not getting to the finish line, right? You know, and so when we say we want to be the co-op agent of choice, a lot of times that's how we're picking our offers, right? When we have 2 really similar, we say, oh, this person's way easier to work with, right? They got a better track record. We know they're having the conversations up front with their customer and managing their expectations. We know we're going to get through any concern that might come up during inspections with this agent because they're a seasoned agent or we know they're really savvy. That's awesome. Right? So it's your job to be the narrator, right? You've got to be the one explaining to your customer because all they're doing is reading headlines. They're reading headlines that inventory is down. You know, they're reading headlines that sales are up X amount of percent over last year at this time. Well, of course. I mean, we were in shelter in place, right? So the numbers are skewed, but it's the writer's job to get your attention and to get you to click on the story. But a lot of times all your seller is seeing is that headline and they keep scrolling. So you're the one that has to educate them and explain to them what the market's actually doing right now. Yes, sir.
So to kind of piggyback off of Cole's scenario, how are you getting contingency for closing offers accepted? Is there any other strategies that you're using outside of what you do with governmental?
I just think, you know, being able to be very, very clear on where you are on that side of the transaction, you know, so if I do send over and it's got a contingency on the successful close of their property, I let them know in that cover sheet, we're already through inspections, we're already through appraisals, you know, I've just spoken with the lender and let them know how solid that other one is. And And then that just moves it right along.
And say Guy Calloway is the buyer's agent on that one, right? Brian Stone's the buyer's agent on that one. Like go that much farther so that they can see all the elements so that they feel comfortable. The more data you can give them, the easier it's going to be, right? So saying Oak Star is the lender, right? USA Mortgage is the lender. You know, Brian's the agent. We're already past inspections. We're expecting the appraisal on the 22nd, right? Give them all the data so that they feel good about it. Go ahead.
I got an offer accepted the other day that we're not offers. And I had no.
Yep.
And it was because of that. Because the lender reached out on Sunday night and called the listing agent, another KW agent, by the way. We got the offer accepted. So that's another
awesome.
tip.
I love that. Didn't cost your buyer anything. Yes. Can you run a mic over here? Yes. Sorry, Guy.
Come on, Vanna. Okay. So as a builder, I have a question. Like we have several that's going to come on the market. It's not broke ground yet. Would it be beneficial to go ahead and list those and maybe just get those out to our Keller Williams agents first and say, hey, I have these coming up? Because start to finish with build with somebody who is approved is 7 to 9 months. Is that too premature or should it be something because we already have like the front elevations and this homes we built prior before, so we can show what the end product could look like, but yet they can still pick colors and so forth and things like that and finishes.
Don, can we list it without a foundation? I think it has to have a foundation. Yeah, I think you have to have a foundation in order to put it in MLS, but check the rules. I haven't looked at that in a really long time. I think it has to have a foundation, but call Kathy and ask. She's a wealth of knowledge.
Okay.
And just ask her, when is it okay to list?
Okay, great.
Hey, Adam or Kari, can one of you repeat what Mark had said just a little bit ago? He didn't have a mic and they're asking in the chat.
Absolutely. So Mark was working with a buyer, had written a contract. There were 9 offers. On Sunday evening, he called the lender, the buyer's lender, and said, hey, would you mind to reach out to the listing agent and tell them I got a really solid buyer? And the lender reached out to the listing agent, another Keller Williams agent, kind of tooted the horn of the buyer and said how great they were. And then that's how they decided to choose Mark's offer. So nice work, Mark, and didn't cost the buyer a nickel.
So talking about sellers, we're talking about contingencies. You got a seller that needs to buy. Have you had any success getting either a contingency contract, say to sell, or doing I had a conversation with, have got several in the pipe that we've been having the conversation about writing something like a contingency to close, knowing we're going to be able to sell their house, even though it's not under contract, but a contingency to close along those lines. I don't know if I'm making,
Keep going.
So their house is not on the market. We write a 60-day close. We're going to close on or before this date. And part of it, I dealt with a new construction where this came from, and they didn't really care that it was contingent. They marked it pending. We gave a non-refundable earnest money, and we just got to close by that date.
We've done that.
Yeah.
As
And that's,
listing agents,
it was kind of hitting me, talking with some of my sellers that's,
When you tell me you have a 322 in Ozark,
right.
just send me the offer, bud.
Right.
I mean, it's put it on the market.
Yep. 5.3 at 250
That's
in
exactly
Ozark.
right.
Not right.
So from the listing side, had a lot of luck with it, right? You're probably playing with fire as a buyer's agent,
Right.
right? Because you have to know who you're going up against,
Yes.
and you have to be able to show how you've positioned to sell in the market, and that it's going to move quickly.
Right. Right.
Because, again, the agent has to go back and communicate it to their customer, right?
Right.
So giving them a ton of data is probably key there.
Right. And that's part of the conversation we had with the seller. It's like, we know we can sell it, especially if you're willing to accept X, that's below where the market value is right now. So we can list it above that. And
Sure. I'd
Worst
also
case.
encourage you to go worst case scenario with
Yeah.
the buyer, who's also your seller at the time, and talk to the bank about what a bridge loan looks like.
Right.
What's it look like to own 2 houses if we have to? The likelihood of us having to do so is very slim, but let's go ahead and go through that process so that we have that backup plan in place.
right. Absolutely. That's part of the conversation we had as well. So, okay.
As far as a listing agent, I actually had a buyer's agent actually write in the contract, and this was a widower and or at least a divorcee. And he actually wrote in, and I'd never seen this before in all these years, but he actually put in that the buyers would be able to take care of any unwanted items left in the home. And to my seller, she was in her 60s. That was what, just of all the other offers, that was the most attractive for her. So I just wanted to share that for any of your buyers to really find out what is going on with the sellers, their situation, and removing those unwanted items. And she didn't like leave just like trash everywhere, but for unwanted items that she didn't have to deal with, it really made a lot of difference.
Great piece of advice. Again, thinking outside the box. Let's switch topics. What other issues are you guys having right now? Okay. So listings in your pipeline, getting them on the market, or just meeting people in general? Okay. Talk to me about what you're doing currently.
It's too expensive. Oh. They don't want to sell because they're afraid the buying process, how much more are they going to pay? And that's pretty much it.
So you have people in your pipeline that would sell
Mhm.
if they knew they were getting a value on the purchase.
Right.
So I think that's inviting them into your office for what we call a strategy session and talk about what that would look like. Because oftentimes it's a lot easier than what you think it is. They've built something up in their head that isn't a big deal as long as you can educate them. So bring them into the office and talk to them about what a value looks like to them. And showing them properties, show them closed properties, right? Don't show them active inventory, show them closed properties. So you have a lot to look at and they can see the actual sales price that things sold for. Oh, wow. If you could find me something like that,
Mhm.
right? Instead of looking at the active inventory, because there's not a lot to look at, you're just giving them data. So just pull up the school district they're interested in, the neighborhood they're interested in, walkout basement, 5-bedroom, whatever it is, right? And show them, here's what sold in the last 180 days in that area. Would any of these have been appealing to you? Oh, wow. And you can see the actual sale prices, right? So you're cutting right through any concern that they have.
Thank you.
Well, and think about timelines too. Like anytime that somebody says, I want to buy something in 6 months, you call them and they've bought something, if you missed it or something like that, it's 2 months, right? So if you can actually show them what is available or show them what you can find, because we sell so much shadow inventory, you oftentimes find their timeline shrinks dramatically. So.
I think a very specific part to that is the objection of, yes, let's say I'm making 40 grand, but I'm gonna have to spend that 40 grand to get into a bigger house.
Sure.
And so sometimes they don't want to do that. Sometimes they do, but the concern is, why would I go through the process and then turn around and I'm just buying another inflated property. Essentially,
A
that's what
lateral
they're saying.
move. Feels
Yeah.
lateral. Yeah. Feels like a sidestep.
They're not actually making any money. They feel like they're just moving it, shuffling it from one to the other.
What's the motivation for moving in the first place?
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Is it acreage? Is it a pool? Is it a school district? Is it downsizing? Right. Let's go back to that motivation that they had originally and tap into that. Right. If they're just moving to be moving, you probably have a concern there. Right. But usually there's some motivation that you can go back to and talk to them about what's important.
So what would you say if they're moving just to make money? Because I have several people that are moving right now to make as much money as they can to pay off debt or something.
Sure.
But then
Not with a ton of people.
Yep. And you want to have that strategy session and include the lender, invite the lender into your office or go into the lender's office with them and bring the data, right? You've already walked through the house. You know what it's going to sell for. You know what their equity position is going to be. So let's go through the debt and figure out how much of that equity we're going to have to use and allocate it to debt and how much we can use for the down payment for the new house, run payment scenarios on the new house at their new mortgage rate, right? Because hopefully it's improved from what they're currently paying, and then show them that picture and see if you can get buy into that picture.
Excellent.
That's a big deal because that debt, I've had people sell their house, pay off their student loans, pay off a ton of debt and still get into the house that they wanted. And it was just like a huge relief for them. Huge relief, right? They could sleep at night. So it's a big deal.
And I had this is my personal scenario that I ran for a presentation I gave. When I bought my house 2 years ago, and then this past year, my equity was up over $50,000. And because of where rates had gone, I could borrow another $50,000 and not change my financial picture at all. And that was just a conversation and having with, as a presentation, but that's a conversation I have with people, that there are those opportunities, and you do get to, everyone wants to sell high and buy low, but reality, you can't do that. You sell high, buy high, or sell low, buy low. You choose. You can sell your house for a premium now and buy a house at a premium, or, you're going to feel like you lost money if the market did, if we saw the market come down, you're going to feel like you lost money. It doesn't matter how much.
Great example of that is how often did you have this conversation that we're talking about right now last year with people, right? Don't you wish you would have sold last year and bought last year, right? Because look at what the market's done, right? And you're going to go broke trying to time the market, right? You're never going to be able to do it. And you're not going to know you missed it until the market's gone.
Yep.
Right? You're not going to realize that you missed it until it's over with. And so you're just never going to be able to time the market. And so we really need to go back to what the motivation is for moving in the first place. Go ahead, Amy.
What are you saying to first-time buyers who say, I'm going to wait it out until the market crashes, until prices dip? And they're going to end up never getting to own. They're going to price themselves out of the market. What's your script on that?
So why is that important to you? Right? That's exactly what I would ask them. Like, why is that important to you? Right? And what's crash mean to you? Right? You're a $100,000 buyer. So you hope it drops 10%, right? We're changing your payment $40 a month, right? No, but it's an education. Let's have that conversation. What's that look like to you when the market corrects itself? What are you looking for?
Well, and how much are you paying in rent right now? So you're paying $1,000 in rent right now. And so you're willing to sacrifice $12,000 that's going to nothing, versus we could be purchasing something that's actually going to something. And I have that all the time. People will come and they'll sit down and they'll say, well, I've been renting. Oh, cool. Okay. So, how long you've been renting? Because you can't say lease. Nobody understands what lease means. But so you've been renting for 5 years, and then you say, okay, so it's $1,000. Well, if you actually pull it up and show it to them, so you've paid this much money
$1,000.
that is not going, towards anything. It is a big, but you have to tell them, you have to show them, right? Because how many times does that happen to you where you I know that I moved in my first house and I was like, I'll be here 2 years. We lived there 8, right? You blink and all of a sudden you realize, well, whenever you're renting and you realize how much money that you've just thrown away, it's
Again,
a big eye opener.
Trying to time the market, right? Waiting for that market to correct. So if it's more important to them to get a value on the house, maybe they're just not a buyer right now, but they're still a buyer, right? You can still start dripping on them. You can still have an agency agreement with them, right? Because I think once that old adage, buyers are liars, they're not really liars. They just don't know, right? They tell you that their time frame is 180 days and you end up calling them in 90 thinking you're getting ahead of the curve and they bought 30 days ago, right? They just don't know. But that awareness does the heavy lifting for you. It's just getting in front of them and educating them and asking them, why is that important to you? And letting them go deep with you about a concern that they have, or maybe that their parents had to short sell when they were in high school and they're scared of it, right? Like getting down to that real fear factor of what's the concern. We got them all coffeeed up, Tiffany. Good job.
Anything else? Okay.
You guys are easy today.
Yeah.
Yes,
Can I
sir.
give everybody, Adam and Kari, a round of applause?
Hey, we're gonna cover escalation clauses really fast.
Okay.
Our broker asked us to.
Okay.
Go ahead, Don.
No, I just think it's important for everyone to know how you guys are handling it. Are you issuing those? Are you accepting those? Are you writing offers at whatever your top escalation price would be? What's your strategy with those? Is it per transaction, or are you just having across the board? What are you guys doing with that?
Then I'll answer on the list side. Go ahead.
So on the buy side, it's definitely something that I have a conversation with. And so I make sure that the buyer completely understands what is the escalation or acceleration clause. So we go over it. So everybody's very clear on it. And then whenever I make that initial phone call, I always ask, are you accepting those? Here's the deal. If everybody's using them, when does it stop? Right. So I've ran into several issues where there's, 8 offers and 4 of them have escalation clauses, and you're basically just trumping the other one. Right. But some of them, a lot of times they just stop at the same number. So people just call for highest and best. So I think that it was a really great strategy once upon a time, and I will do them if they are allowed. But what we're seeing, if there's 8 offers on it, there's several already on it. So
one thing I want you to take away from what Kari said, don't make the assumption that the agent understands what an escalation clause is, right? When she says, are they allowed? Call first before you waste your time, get your buyer hyped up, write the contract, call the agent, have a conversation with them. The buyer's interested in submitting an offer with an escalation clause. Can I talk to you about that? Nope, I know everything I need to know. Send it over, right? Or what are you talking about? Or you're unethical, right? We've had that recently, right?
Adam, that happened this weekend. I wrote an escalation clause and the agent called me unethical.
Because she'd never heard of it before. She didn't know what was happening. And the reason she said you're unethical is because you ask in the offer to see the other offer, right? And she's like, I'm the broker. You can't do that. I'm not going to disclose information to you about another customer. I get that, right? But it's just asking up front if they're allowed to do it or if they're going to present it to their client. And if they're concerned about it, then we're going straight to highest and best on, right? We're going back to our old tactics and just asking the buyer, if you wake up tomorrow morning and find out you lost this property, what's it worth to you? Right? Oh my God, I can't tell my wife I'm losing this property. Okay, let's have that conversation. This is where we think the CMA is going to come in at. This is where we think appraisal is going to come in at. What's the house worth to you, right? And having that conversation. And I think we can talk about bully offers right now. And having that conversation with the buyer and let them decide. But again, it's an education piece, right? Getting all that data out in front of them and letting them decide what they want to do, but getting that in front of them and then putting it in front of the other agent and hoping you get it, right? Well, we're also going to go back to all these other items that we went over to earlier. Bully offers. So, I'm not sure yet what the best practice is as a listing agent of putting a house on the market on Thursday and holding it till Sunday. Or putting it on
like
Friday and holding it till Monday,
makes me
right?
panic.
Is that best practice? We don't know the answer yet. I don't think we've had enough time to go back and look at the data and say, hey, this is probably the best, or should we just take the best offer as they come? Is highest and best the best and making everybody fight against each other like old Freddie Mac style? I don't know the answer to that. And so, but we do know that if we're right in front of MLS all day long, we're watching the data come through, we have our buyer ready, willing, and able to go, and we're getting over there first, and we're writing that offer really high, where they can call their seller and get really excited about it, and we're putting a drop dead date on it, and it's long before the Monday 5 p.m. deadline. And we're winning a lot of offers that way. By going immediately with our highest and best, just going in and dropping the gauntlet and saying, this is it. Call your seller, give them back their weekend, and take our offer. And we're getting a lot of offers done that way.
And I've written it in there to cancel showings.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you guys. You guys were awesome. Thanks, Adam and Kari. And thank you, Tiffany from Legal Land Title for the coffee. Our pleasure. Got us all pumped up for a Tuesday. Feels like a Monday. But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you.
Okay, so be on the lookout for any more announcements in Nicole's email about upcoming trainings, and have a wonderful Tuesday, y'all.